dynamic, proactive, and effective in spite of the constraints imposed by COVID-19. It is now my pleasure to invite Mr. Moonilal Lalchan, Chairman of the Board of Procurement Regulation and Procurement Regulator, to give the feature address, which is entitled Procurement Legislation, the Next Steps. Mr. Lalchan.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chairman and members of the board, especially invited guests this afternoon, for once again giving me the opportunity to speak with you in terms of where we are as an organization and next steps. I'm out of the country right now, so someone can just indicate that you are hearing me plain. Okay,
yes,
great.
we are hearing you. Yeah.
Great. So if, for example, anything goes a little bit down, I'll try to move closer to one of the signal strengths. All right, so to actually get to the discussion, I think I need to indicate some of the things that we have been working on and what have been completed to date, and then take it to the next step, and hopefully we'll get some discussion along the lines of some of the changes that has been recently made. Under Section 13 of the Act, we are responsible for a number of different things to be done to operationalize the Act. And I'll go through very quickly some of those initiatives. One is to establish a comprehensive database of tenders and awarded contracts. What that does is that it allows the public body to report on a periodic basis every quarter all the tenders awarded, to whom it was awarded, the value of the contracts awarded, and if there are any variation orders. That comprehensive database has been completed and is now active. To set the training standards, competency levels, and certification requirements, we have completed the training standards, competency levels, and certification requirements for all public officers involved in directly and indirectly in the procurement activities. That's on our website now. And that is important because a number of practitioners now have to depend solely on the ministries and so on, have to depend on the practitioners, because now the Central Tenders Board Act will go away once there is full proclamation. To issue guidelines on the retention and disposal of public property, those have been completed and they are on our website. To prepare model handbooks and with standardized bidding documents, all have been completed and they are on the website. We have had a number of training sessions with public officers to use those handbooks and guidelines, and those have been recorded and online. To promote the use of technology in procurement and disposal, we are in the process of looking at e-procurement systems so that we can advise on the best system to be operationalized. We have harmonized the policies and systems and practices. For example, we have written one handbook and guideline for the regional corporation, one for regional health authorities, and so that they can consolidate how they do their procurement. So that's completed. To promote the public awareness, so far we have had, including today's session, I've just met with the Caribbean Airlines senior executive, and we have had so far 208 of these public awareness sessions to review practices and delivery systems. We continue to review the different systems and practices in operation, and as we find new and better ways to do things, we are including those in our handbooks and guidelines. To act for the state to dispose of real property, this is under Section 13(1)(o). During our discussion with the government, we recommended that this should not form part of our mandate because this was taken straight out of the Central Tenders Board Act. And just before this on O, under N, it says that we should investigate any reports that comes to the attention of the office in terms of procurement and disposal of property. And therefore, we found it to be a conflict that we are acting for and on behalf of the state to dispose of those property and then having to come back and investigate those same disposals. So what we suggested to the government is that there should be another organization that deals with the whole issue of disposal, We will set the tone in terms of the handbooks and guidelines that you have to follow and put the necessary recommendations in terms of the regulations in place. And that will give us an opportunity to investigate any disposal of real property as and when it happens. To advise on the best practice for value for money, we have been constantly doing that in terms of all of our rollout. Audit and review the system of procurement and disposal of public property. We have our audit and investigative team already on board and trained. Investigate on our own initiative or upon complaint from any party involved in public procurement and disposal of public property or any member of the public. So far, we have met, and we are very glad that the judiciary came on board, and we have had 12 different training initiatives that was conducted by the judiciary. We had about 7 of the judges in the judiciary trained the Office of Procurement Regulation, board members and team members in how to conduct hearing proceedings in terms of admissibility of evidence and all these different things. And we have had several sessions also with the Caribbean Court of Justice. 2 of their judges came on board and assisted us. So all those have been completed. So as you can see, just based on that quick snapshot there, we have completed almost everything that is required to operationalize the Act in terms of Section 13. So there is nothing that the office needs to do. When the office was appointed, the members of the board was appointed in January of 2018. 2 things happened. One, we were asked to look at, in addition to operationalizing the Act and putting all these things in place under Section 13, we were given a handbook and guideline that was prepared by the UNDP. And during our discussions with the public, it was felt that that was too cumbersome. It was one handbook and guideline consisting of 250-something pages that was confusing to some of our stakeholders. And we were asked to review that. And out of that came about 34 special handbooks and guidelines that we have now developed that deals with everything that you deal with under procurement and disposal. All those are on the website. So that was completed and was based on feedback. Another piece of feedback that we got when we were given the regulations in draft form in 2018. The regulations themselves, we were told there was not public consultation for those regulations, and we should have public consultation. And therefore, we started with a number of consultations in Port of Spain, San Fernando, and Tobago. And coming out of those, 2 things happened. One, we got some recommendations where we should make some changes to the Act and also to develop the regulations. And we brought on board a consultant, and the first set of regulations were developed in November of 2018 and submitted to the Ministry of Finance. Out of those submissions, the Ministry of Finance took the advice of 2 senior counsel, and they looked at it in terms of whether or not the regulations were ultra-vires, the Act, and so on. And we had recommendations coming out of that. We then had a number of different discussions with the Ministry of Finance and other stakeholders. And out of that, we finalized the regulations in November 13 of 2019. Since November 13 of 2019, those regulations are in the same format and the same content. Nothing has changed from November 13 when we sent it to the Minister of Finance to today. Those are the same regulations that have been on our website, and it is available for any member of the public to look at those regulations. It is posted on our website. So what I'm saying is that what you may have heard, that only in November or October of this year we prepared those regulations, it has not changed since November 13th of 2019, and I need to reinforce that. Additionally, some recommendations came forward. For example, when we met with the legal persons, what we were told was that the definition for bid rigging did not in itself constitute a criminal offense. And therefore, we had to recommend changes to that. And that is one of the changes that you saw. The other change you would have seen would have been the whole removal of Section 13.10. That was based on our recommendation. The extension to respond to the hearing proceedings from 20 days to 30 days. That was our recommendation. So all our recommendations were taken on board and put forward in amendments. What we did not recommend was any amendment to Section 7.2 and any addition to Section 7 through the introduction of the Part 5 now, Section 5. Those were not our recommendations, and we are on record as stating very clearly that we are in support of the civil society groups not to change those parts of the legislation. So that's where it is at present. We all know it went through the Parliament and it was approved and so on. However, there are some inconsistency in what is being reported. The whole issue of public-private partnership arrangements under the new arrangement is still intact. That has not changed. So that falls squarely under the purview of the office. Even though with the amendment to 7.2, that is still dependent on what is the compliance with Section 29. So all suppliers and contractors have to be in compliance with Section 29, and so do all government-to-government, international lending agency agreements, and also technical cooperation. So it still requires, and you have to state, if whatever public body is involved in those activities must state that they are in compliance with Section 29, which is very rigorous. You must send a report to the office of the compliance, and if there is non-compliance, it gives us an opportunity to review that. And with those non-compliance under Section 29, that has to be reported still to Parliament. So those sections still remain. So even though it, in layman's term, it was watered down to some extent, there is still some rigid reporting requirements under 29, 29.3, 4. You are still required to report to the office, and the office has the responsibility for reporting. And we could probably discuss some of those things. And then came the addition of section, the additional 5. And we all know that based on some feedback from the independent senators, that was changed. It's still, what I want to say here is that under the regulations, there was adequate provisions in the regulations, and there still is adequate provision in the regulations to deal with emergency purchases and purchases for specialist type of services. And that is adequately provided for. What we did a lot of research into what is a good practice. And the best practice we found internationally was in Botswana. And we recommended the Botswana model, and we actually put the Botswana model into the regulations. So that would have provided sufficient safeguards in the case of when you have medical emergencies, the type of services that you will fall under emergency, and you would have been protected there, and you would have been given the flexibility. So where we are at. So there is the amendment, the third amendment now. The office is fully up and running. We are fully funded presently. And the regulations, we believe, is the only sticking point right now to give effect to the full proclamation. Now, that said, it's not as simple as just the regulations. And allow me just to refer to one of my slides here. So some of the things that still has to be done. If there are some amendments to the regulation that is required based on the recent amendments to the legislation, we have to quickly get on board with that and develop those. What our preliminary review of that suggests that there may not be any major requirements there. Providing that there are no further amendments, the regulation should be brought before Parliament as a matter of urgency. That is for affirmative resolution. The disposal of real property regulations has to be developed by the Minister of Finance for the tabling in Parliament for negative resolution. We are unsure as to where that is presently. The guidelines for new exemptions has to be developed now under Section 5 by the Minister of Finance, sent to the office for the review, and then the office then takes that to Parliament for laying in Parliament for affirmative resolution. That has to be developed. The whole operationalization of the review board still has to be done. We are unsure as to where the review board stands right now because we are aware that they haven't met. They have been appointed, but we are unsure as to how ready they are to take up that position. So those are some of the things that are still required to give full operationalization of the Act upon full proclamation. One of the concerns we have, once we have full proclamation, is whether or not the public bodies, especially the ministries, will have the necessary capacity and capabilities to deal with procurement after the Central Tenders Board has been wound up. That's an area of concern we continue to have, because we did a survey among procurement officers, and 67% of the procurement officers suggested to us that they are not ready to take on the role because there is a deficiency in that capacity. That's a concern we have right now once we go full proclamation. So those are some of the issues that we will be dealing with. And once you have full proclamation, we have agreed for a 6 months transition period from the old system to the new system. And what that mainly does in terms of, we have rolled out the database to have contractors and suppliers pre-qualified. We had 1,400 suppliers and contractors so far attended those sessions. We have over 200 already started the process of getting registered. To give full proclamation, once you have full proclamation, it is required that you use the database of the office, the OPR. That would not be up and running, and we suggest that that is the 6 months transition, whereby public bodies can continue to use their existing list of pre-qualified contractors, and then over a 6 months period, that is done and the transition takes place, whereby it will be then mandatory after 6 months that you could only use the one that is held by the OPR. And that is one of the things that we are sure that we'll be able to accomplish, because we have started that process and it's going very smooth so far. So I'll pause there. I think my 20 minutes might just have been up around that time. So I'll pause there to probably open it up for any questions, but that's the plan moving forward, and some of the obstacles that may stand in the way, and some of the things that has to be done in terms of the full proclamation from where we sit as a board.